All right, so here's the story behind high velocity intake ports. This is a great story. This is kind of one of those things in the history and the bowels of General Motors you never really get to hear about. It's kind of some of the things that never make it public, but we wanted to share it with you today because it is a fantastic story. So like Mike said, we use a lot of computer-aided engineering, and it is often anchored in what we have run in the past for its level of fidelity. When you go outside of that and extrapolate, it gets you close, but sometimes it doesn't pick up all of the nuances and particular details and boundary conditions that you're not really expecting to see. So to be honest, we were a little short at one point in time in development, and we were trying to claw back on some power, and we were working with analysis guys. You know, they were trying to help and redirect us, and we went kind of in a dual path, working in concert with our analysis guys, and we went old school, we went hot rod. We went down to our GM racing wing, which is the end of our dynos, walked in there, and I introduced to you Mr. Rick Swaine, who has always been known as Small Port Ricky. We called him Racing Rick. We named our prototype cylinder head after him. He worked at Jack Roush Industries in the 90s. He was a cylinder head technician and supported the Trans Am series. Tommy Kendall, who dominated that series in that time frame. He was the man behind a big part of making that engines in those cars really dominate, pull out of the corners with his small port strategy. And you know, he's not an engineer, he's not a technical person by any means. He just sees things, he hears things, he runs an airflow bench, he does valve jobs. It's just, he's in tune to what a cylinder head likes and needs. He can look at a port and tell you, yeah, that's for, you know, that's a 750 horsepower port, and you don't have enough valve or bore or stroke to get there. You need, you know, big block type size. And that's kind of where we started here. You can see here a prototype head we had. This was kind of our original port size. And he did a little trick that he likes to do, and you can see him over here working with me on my computer at a cross section of a head, kind of pointing out some transition areas. He filled in with epoxy our port, said that port's too big. I'm gonna fill that in. He took out 57 cc's out of that port. You can kind of see the line right here where he had the layout fluid, where he filled that in comparison to this port. And you can see a better view of the epoxy. Now he did all this by hand, built us a complete stack. We had an RR1, we called it Racing Rick 1 iteration. It was mostly some valve job changes, the back angle grinding like we talked about, and a couple other subtle things that got us a good step up, but he said, this is the trick. If you guys want to change this casting and want to go through this, this is what we need to try. And at the point we said, let's do it. So we turned him loose in about 2 weeks. He made us a set of cylinder heads, did the valve job, did all these ports, painted it with the fuel resistant paint, you know, bigger, oops. All right, so the lesson there was bigger is not always better with the same bore area. You know, one might say, well, why not just increase lift? Why not just increase your duration? You get more overlap, you get, you know, some rough idles and things that are not that much nicer to feel and hear, not always great for emissions. And valve train stress, cam spalling, all that kind of stuff is not advantageous to that. So we're really kind of right up to where we're comfortable with our valve train limitations, and we already made some subtle changes. Exhaust valve, of course, you can take a little more liberties with because it is a later valve line. So, you know, all that was baked in there. Airspeed, airspeed, airspeed is what he always told me. Velocity is your friend, that ram air effect. And it helps all around. As you can see, we're eclipsing that LT2 torque curve with that. So the point in this is there is still some level of art and intuitive intellect based on experience in design and development of intake systems. And he was a huge part of this. He retired about 3 years ago. I still keep in touch with him. We just had a great relationship, and it was just a great story. And it's really what gives this engine its thumpy, you know, stroke-like character. In concert with you know, the smaller high-velocity port, we needed an intake manifold to match it. We had an early intake manifold that had more volume, more larger ports, so we had to make an intake manifold to do that in concert. He did all this himself. He took sheet metal and epoxy. You can see the cutout here. We cut off the top of one of our early manifolds, these ports, filled in the floor, taking out volume because you've got to get the volume out of the intake if you're taking it out of the cylinder head. to get that velocity up as it enters and be a full rush of air in once it's coming into the manifold. And you can see the progression. He did this in about 2 weeks. It's just amazing. And epoxied all around, nice round bell mouse. You can see here is original, what we call the RR2 racing rig port. And then we turn that into an actual casting by changing the cores. And then you can see here when we put this whole package together, these are our test engineers at the dyno cell, making it all work and wringing it out and giving the performance that we're talking to you guys about today, the 535 and the 520. So the proof is in the power. With this high velocity port design, we got mid lift and peak airflow gains. This is the LT2 here in green. This is the LS6. So the same valve bore area, high velocity intake port. This is the gains we got over the LT2 to get that air in the cylinder to harness that and create the performance we're getting. On our SAE cert test, we have 104% volumetric efficiency, like Mike was talking about, with the momentum of the air rushing in, packing that cylinder. So it's actually acting like a bigger engine. 104% of a 6.7 liter is 7 liters. So it's acting like that. The high velocity port and the tuning of the system, we were able to shift down the peak torque from 5200 to 4600, LT2 to LS6, same 6500 on the LT2 to 6100 on the LS6. Broader, more usable, low end grunt, like Mike was saying, canyon carving, wanting to pull out in traffic. It's just there, it's usable, and it's wide. Like you can see, it's basically eclipsing, it's filling in here. And with the harness more of that additional airflow with the 13:1 compression ratio and the targeted cooling to allow us to get that combustion phasing for optimal mechanical work.